What up, team? Got a banger video for you today, showing you how to turn small pants into baggy shorts. I'm actually about to release a new shorts pattern, but someone donated me these military pants that are swag, but a little bit small, and then I also had these jeans. So I'm gonna show you the ways to turn them into baggy shorts. And make sure to watch to the end of the video where I will be giving away the black baggy jorts to one of you guys. If you do wanna make shorts from scratch, this pattern will be out soon, and I did already release a jorts pattern with a full tutorial on my channel. All right, so all you're gonna need for this project is a pair of pants, something to cut, measure, and mark. I will be going over a few ways to go about this, but you should really only need a pair of pants and no fabric to supplement. But if you're gonna use like tiny pants and you wanna have super baggy shorts, you might need some extra fabric. For method one, we are going to be doing a chop and then adding an inseam panel. So we're gonna first cut them to our desired length plus enough room to hem them, and then adding an inseam panel to make them baggier. I will go over this little note sheet I made, but it is important to note that for this first method, it won't make the waist bigger. That will be in the next method. So for method one, you want ones that actually do fit your waist. So it would be wise to try your pants on. As you can see, these fit my waist fine. So we're not only trying them on to gauge how long we want the shorts to be, but also get a sense of how much baggier we're gonna make the legs. So when we add the inseam panel, we're expanding the shorts through the crotch and the inner thigh. So the panel will run right here. So this will drop and widen the rise or the crotch area, and then it does make them baggier from the inside of the leg. So it will be adding some length to the crotch, which is actually gonna be good for me. It's kind of going up my butt, not too bad. But when we add that inseam panel, it will lengthen the rise and give more room in the entire crotch. But it is important to be careful because if the inseam panel is too large, so too wide, it can add unnecessary bulk and width at the crotch. And if we have the panel too wide on the inner leg, it can cause the shorts to flare out. So you can imagine if we add too much to the inseam, there will be too much in the crotch, and then also the legs will start to flare out. Well, this is kind of a decision you have to make for yourself and the pants that you're turning into shorts. I will go over exactly what measurements I'm doing, but this will take a little bit of your own intuition. And if you like the flared shorts look, then go crazy. So before I do anything about the inseam panel, I'm just going to decide how long I want my shorts to be. So I'm just gonna grab some chalk and mark where I want the finished length to be. I just took my chalk and marked exactly where I want my finished length to be. So when I trim this off, I will actually cut a little bit below this so I have room to hem it. Once you have marked the length of your shorts, you're now gonna wanna decide how wide you want your inseam panel to be. So how much wider you want your shorts to be. Also keeping in consideration that it will be adding to the crotch length. So I already decided I'm going to be doing a 2-inch panel all the way around my inseam. I'm just going to be doing a rectangle, so that will add 2 inches to my crotch as well. But you can also do an inseam panel something like this, so it's very straight through the legs, and then once it gets to the crotch, it narrows and then straightens out again. That would be if you didn't want to add too much to the crotch, or if you wanted to add a lot to the legs and not a lot to the crotch. So like I said, I'm going to be adding a 2-inch panel to the entire inseam. Once you've decided your length and then also how big your inseam panel is going to be, you can take these pants off. Now that you have your pants off and you have your marked length, I'm going to take my ruler and chalk and mark my hem allowance. So I'm just gonna do a double 1/2-inch fold for my hem. So I'm gonna mark 1 inch below that line across. The length of your hem is really up to you. I'm going with a slightly smaller hem just so I can ensure that I have enough fabric for the inseam panel. Before you do all of the marking, it's probably smart to give your pants an iron. All right, so I marked my pants length and then my cut line. So this is my pants length plus hem allowance. Now you can go ahead and chop off the bottom of your pants. Boom, so make sure to hold on to these, put these to the side. We're gonna use them. Now we have our cut pants. I'm gonna grab a seam ripper and undo the entire inseam. If you're feeling super lazy, you could literally just cut out your entire inseam, but I don't really have fabric to spare, and it's not that hard to just use a seam ripper. So we're undoing from the inner bottom of one leg all the way through past the crotch to the other inner bottom of the other leg. So the entire inseam, we need to be wide open. Also, if your inseam was stitched with a chain stitch and you find the right thread, you can just literally pull the entire thing loose. Boom! So your inseam should look something like this, wide open. Now we're gonna wanna bring it over to our ironing board and press the seam allowance and the entire inseam nice and flat. So just taking that seam allowance, pressing it nice and flat, as well as the entire of the inseam. So you're gonna wanna do that to the entire front, and then we'll also do that to the back. All right. Now that your inseam is pressed nice and flat, grab a measuring tape or something to measure, and we are going to measure the length of the entire inseam. So from the bottom of the leg through the crotch to the other bottom of the leg. So I just laid mine nice and flat. You can see there's the fly. And I'm gonna start at the bottom of the leg, measure up to the crotch, making sure it's straightened out. I'm kind of taking note where this seam is. So the seam line where the two fabrics meet, mine is right at 20 inches. And then from there on, should just be another 20 inches, which it is. So my entire inseam is 40 inches, 20 to the center. So whatever the length of your entire inseam is going to be the length of your inseam panel. So my panel is just going to be a rectangle. It will be a length of 40 inches. And then I wanted to add 2 inches. So that's 2 inches plus a ½ inch of seam allowance on each side, totaling 3 inches. And since I deconstructed the inseam, the shorts already have seam allowance. So let's say your shorts already fit pretty well in the crotch. Your piece might look more like this. So I've come in at the center. So my entire inseam is 40 inches, but I've come in at 20 inches and then back out. And I could make a pattern piece for this, but it's very simple. It's just 3 inches by 40 inches. So to make sure I have enough fabric, I'm going to deconstruct these. So undo the side seam as well as release the hem to have as much fabric as possible. And then I'm going to piece them together to make this pattern piece, which is 40 inches by 3 inches because I wanted 2 inch of width plus ½ inch of seam allowance on each side. And you seriously could just cut the shorts and then use other fabric for the pattern piece that makes them baggier, but it will look really nice using the same fabric. And then obviously you're really not wasting much or anything at all. Boom. So this is what my little leg cutoffs are looking like now that I've undid the side seam and released the hems. And like I said, I'm not going to be making a paper pattern piece because it's just a simple rectangle. But you do you, and if you were doing a shape that comes in towards the crotch, you might want to. But mine is just a rectangle 40 inch by 3 inch, and I have a 3 inch wide ruler. So all I'm going to do is use my ruler as a guideline. You could also mark onto your fabric with chalk to get your desired piece. And then as you might be able to tell, these are not 40 inches wide. So I'm going to also use my sewing machine to piece it together to get a 40 inch by 3 inch rectangle, or obviously whatever is specific to your shorts. Boom. So that is what my rectangle is looking like, 40 inches by 3 inches. I only had to piece 2 panels together, and I just sewed them together at a 1/4 inch, hit it with a little double top stitch. I noticed that a lot of the seams on these old military pants were left completely raw, which I actually thought was pretty cool. So I am rolling with that theme, and it obviously makes my life a lot easier, but feel free to finish the seams on your shorts however you'd like. Just make sure to account for the seam allowances accordingly. Now, before we add our inseam panel to our shorts, this is a good opportunity to do any repairs or add anything to the legs while these shorts are still open and are very accessible. I personally am gonna turn on some rap music and see what I can do with the leftover fabric scraps here, and then maybe repair these little holes that were on the hem, but you do you. I just thought it was worth noting that while the legs are open, it's a lot easier to make some customizations and or repair. All right, so I did a little wrap around pocket thing, but now we can add our inseam panel. So we've got our shorts with the inseam still open, our inseam panel. Now we're gonna want to mark the center point of our inseam panel. Mine is just this seam, but if you had to piece yours together a little bit more than just 2 pieces, fold it in half, mark the center point, and then we are going to flip our shorts inside out Once your shorts are inside out, we're going to begin pinning or clipping the inseam panel to both sides of the inseam. And I'm going to be matching up the right side of the inseam panel to the right side of the shorts, even though they are inside out. So I'm going to start at the center point of my inseam panel, and I'm just going to match that up to the center point of the shorts. So that'll be this seam right below the fly. So just grabbing the right side, placing it towards the right side of the shorts, put a clip. So again, right sides together, we're looking at the wrong side, and then there is the right side. So once you pin your center point, you're just going to want to follow the rest of the inseam with your inseam panel pinning all the way down to the bottom of the leg there. So my shorts are still inside out, and then I've pinned that inseam panel along one side of the inseam. Now you're going to want to just stitch this on at whatever seam allowance you decided. And you could pin the other side of the inseam panel to the other side of the inseam now, but it makes it easier to top stitch if you only do one side stitch first, so that's what I'm going to do. So I just started on one of the bottoms of the leg, and then I'm going through and stitching the inseam panel to the entire side of the inseam. So now that I've stitched my inseam panel to one side of the shorts, good sides together, I'm going to top stitch this seam because it is still nice and open, easy to access. And that top stitch is going to be my finish for this seam, but feel free to finish your seams however you'd like. Boom. So I've attached my inseam panel to one side and top stitched, as you can see. My shorts are still inside out, and now I'm just going to line up the remaining raw edges. So starting at the center point of the inseam panel to the center point of the back. And then again, right sides will be facing each other all the way down each leg, clipping or pinning in place. All right, so you should be looking something like this now at this point. So we have one side of the inseam panel stitched, and then the other side is clipped or pinned together. Now we're just going to keep them inside out and stitch the seam closed at your seam allowance that you decided. Boom! So my inseam is now fully closed up. I am going to top stitch this final seam. And a quick pro tip, I'm actually going to be top stitching it through the waist opening because these shorts are still closed up and this is just the widest access point for the entire inseam. Boom! Once your inseam's closed up, you can flip them to the right side and check out what you are working with. Now really all that's left to do is hem your shorts and then they're done. I actually like to flip my shorts inside out to hem them, and I'm just gonna do a simple double roll hem. So I iron my hem inside out, keep them inside out, and then when I stitch it, I stitch on the right side. Trust me, it's the best way. Let's freaking go, squad. So I ended up taking that wraparound pocket out. I just really didn't like how it looked, but I am really enjoying how the inseam panel is looking. Very subtle, yet very unique. And then obviously they are much baggier, roomier in all the right places, including the crotch where I did need a little bit more room. Hey, my friends. Some cool, unique, yet subtle detailing using that original fabric of the shorts. And bang, easy dubs. I'm liking it. On to the next method. So for the next method, we're going to be adding an outseam panel, and I'm also going to be adding another inseam panel just to show you how I would go about making it more narrow in the crotch and then straighten out for the leg. So technically the second method was going to be just the outseam panel, but it'll kind of be a 2-in-1. So it'll be the outseam panel and the inseam panel, and then obviously showing you the different form of the inseam panel. So when we add an outseam panel or a panel near the outseam, it will make the waist bigger. So it increases the waist, hip, and thigh, so it's baggier throughout the entire shorts. It creates a very boxy silhouette, so if they're already a straight fit, it will maintain that. And it doesn't affect the crotch curve, so it is safer for crotch balance. And the things to be careful of, if the panel is too wide on the side, it might not fit the waist, and it can throw off the symmetry of the pants and the pocket placement. And the outseam panel might look something like this, so either just a rectangle or starting narrower and then coming out to a wider, straighter. For For my outseam panel, I'm just going to do a rectangle. And first step, we're gonna try our pants on. Once you have your pants on, we're gonna first make the decision of how long we want our shorts to be, and then how much we are going to extend them on the outseam. And I'm also gonna be doing the inseam. So they are definitely a little bit small on my waist, and the leg portion is quite form-fitting, so I'm gonna be adding a fair amount of width. So I'm first gonna just mark how long I want my shorts to be, and that is really specific to your pants and your body, as well as how much wider you're going to make them. So I just marked what I want the length of my shorts to be, and then you're gonna also want to decide how much wider you want them to be. I'm not gonna be adding a ton to the side seam of my pants. I think I'm gonna do about an inch on each side, and then adding a relatively large inseam panel to make them baggy enough. So with the length marked, I'm going to now mark my hem allowance, which will also be the cut line. I'm just doing an inch, so I'm gonna do a double fold 1/2 inch hem, and then we can cut. Once your pants are cut, I'm gonna move on to doing the outseam panel first because I've already showed the inseam panel. And since my outseam has a rivet directly on it, it's just not gonna be possible to unpick my side seam. So instead, I'm just gonna find a spot very close to the side seam to just cut straight up, which I think is going to be in between the front and the back pocket. So I'll remove this belt loop. But obviously, if you don't have a rivet on your side seam, then you can just unpick it. But also the method of just finding a spot where there's enough open space to sew in that panel is gonna be a lot more time effective, as in take less time. And you can also go the route of unpicking the waistband and then adding an extension, but we're gonna do this the slightly quicker way of just cutting right through the waistband. It's not quite as clean, but on the outside, you won't really notice a difference. So since I have a belt loop right in the way, I'm just gonna pick that off, and then I'll draw my line to cut open the side of my shorts. I remove my belt loops, and I'm going to reattach those later. Now, since I'm just going to cut through the side of my pants, I want to make sure to mark it the exact same way on both sides. So I'm just going to grab my ruler and mark a 1/2 inch behind the side seam all the way down so I can easily replicate that on the other side. So I've just marked a 1/2 inch behind the side seam all the way down. So I'm going to do that to the other side and then cut them open. All right, sides of the shorts are open now. Now you're gonna want to measure the outseam length. And one more quick note, make sure to measure and cut precisely. We like symmetry, and this pretty much goes for anything to do with making clothing. So my outseam measured 28 inches long, and then I said I wanted an inch panel. So I did a little sketch. You can see in the pencil, it is an inch by 28 inches, but I'm adding 1 inch of seam allowance at the top so I can finish it with the waist. And then I'm going to sew each side of my outseam panel at a 1/4 inch, but I added a 1/2 inch of seam allowance on either side because since we just cut through the pants, we have to account for double the amount of seam allowance, so I'm adding that to my panel. So your panel should be the length of your outseam plus seam allowance on the top to finish it off, and then adding double of your seam allowance on either side of the panel because we cut through the pants and we can't add seam allowance there, so we have to add double here. Now that I know what my piece is going to look like, I'm going to use the cutoffs from my pants. Feel free to do that or use some other fabric. And also, if you wanted to go narrower at the waist and then come wider, feel free to change up your piece. With the same principles, you would just start at the top more narrow. Boom, so I just fully deconstructed those little leg cutoffs, and we'll be able to use this cool detail from the hem again. And one of these little scalpel seam rippers, super useful. So now I'm just going to form my rectangle and stitch together the pieces as needed to get my outseam panel. Okay, these are what my outseam panels are looking like. This was the hem, and then this was part of the inseam, I think. Now, before I attach these to my shorts, I'm just going to finish the top edge. I added an inch of seam allowance at the top, so I can either do a 1/2 inch double fold, or I could just serge the top and fold over an inch. This will be specific to how much you added to your panel, though. All right, now we are going to attach our outseam panels to our opened shorts, and I have finished up the top edge. So when we attach it to the already finished waist, everything looks nice and clean. I'm just going to flip my shorts inside out and then place right sides together with my outseam panels. But since I definitely have some bulk on my panels and as well on my shorts, I'm just going to go with my serger and finish each individual edge before straight stitching, so I don't have to serge over so much bulk and maybe get caught up. So I'm going to serge all of the raw edges on both the shorts and the panel panels just to make my life easier. All right, so I've serged the edges of both my outseam panels and the raw edges of my shorts. Now I'm going to flip them inside out. And once inside out, I'm gonna grab one of my inseam panels, place the right side to the right side of my shorts, starting at the top, and then I will just clip along the entire edge. So I've clipped the right side of one of my outseam panels to the right side of my shorts with them inside out, and I could then match the other right side of my outseam panel to the other right side of my outseam, but I'm going to stitch it on first so I can top stitch a little bit easier. Same thing on the other side, taking the right side of my outseam panel and just lining that up to the right side of my shorts, starting at the top, and clip all the way down. So I've attached them to the left and the right side, but just starting with one piece first so I can stitch it and then top stitch it before closing it up fully. So after stitching one of my sides, just flipping it open, and then I will top stitch this seam. Boom. So sewn into one side and then top stitched. Now I'll do this to the other side before closing it all up. All right, so I've attached my outseam panels to one of the sides, as you can see, and top stitched. Now all I'm going to do is flip the other side of my shorts up to that outseam panel, lining up the raw edges. Then I will clip both sides in place and stitch it down. So again, just starting at the top here, lining it up and going down the entire leg. Good sides together. Should look something like that. And now stitch it all up. Boom! So once you close up the other side of your outseam, you can call it here, I am going to top stitch the other seam as well. And how I'm going to do that is actually open up the fly, keep them inside out, and then just top stitch on the right side while they're still inside out through the waist opening. Now we can flip them to the right side. Boom! So obviously, if you're happy with how they fit now, you can just hem them or leave them raw and call it a day. I am going to also be adding an inseam panel, but am super happy with how this side panel came out. So I'm going to quickly show you how I would do the inseam panel that starts more narrow and then widens up. And it's pretty clear to see how it really narrows down towards the knee. And if I put my little right angle ruler, I can see from the crotch point to the bottom, or roughly the knee, it tapers in about 3 inches. And it really straightens out here, so the taper only really lasts for about 9 inches. I'll say about 9 inches. And my whole inseam is about 18¼ inches. So for my inseam panel, I will have it taper for about 9 inches and then straighten out for the remaining 9 inches. So I drew a little sketch of what I want the panel to be, and then it with seam allowance. So this will be half of my inseam. At the crotch area, I'm adding 1 inch of space and then tapering for 9½ inches, because I kind of looked at the curve of my pants, up to 2½ inches, and then going straight down from there. And then I added all of my lengths with seam allowance. So it'll be 3 inches at the bottom, 2 inches at the top. It'll taper out for 9½ inches here to 2½ inches, and then straighten out for 9¼ You could make a pattern piece for this out of paper. I'm just going to refer to this and chalk it out. Now I'm just going to use my remaining fabric that I cut off from the pants and draw 2 of these shapes to make my inseam panel. All right, this is how it's looking on my fabric. So from 2 inches, tapering up and then straightening out. So I'm going to cut this one out that I traced, and then I'll just use that piece to cut an identical one and sew them together at the top. All right, so both of my panels are cut out, and this was actually 3.5 inches, not 3 inches. So now I'm going to attach them at the narrowest point, and that will be our center point. Then I'm going to undo and attach it to the inseam like I did in the beginning of the video. I'll hem them up, and then we're done. Hell yeah, squad. So once you hem them up, you are finished. This is how mine came out. So a little more room in the butt, obviously much wider. And we got some interesting, fun detailing on the sides. And on the inseam, I actually ended up extending the inseam panel more to make them a little bit wider. But yeah, I hope you are as happy as I am with how your shorts came out. And I'm actually going to be giving these shorts away. All you got to do is like, comment, subscribe. I'll be picking a random comment in a week, and I'll ship them to your house for free. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, I hope that you have a great baggy pair
of shorts. Also leave a comment if you have any questions. My next video will be for the Sandler shorts, and then soon after that, how to copy pants into a pattern. But I love you, squad. I'm out.